Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 32 deadline decisions where I'll discuss your final questions and dilemmas such as triple captain, bench boost, rotation and much more. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, let's begin the video with those press conference updates as of Friday afternoon at 3 PM. And we actually have got quite a few important updates, but sadly a lot of managers are quite vague these days. So a lot of them aren't particularly clear cut. And I know for a lot of you looking to potentially play the bench boost this week, it makes it very tricky. If you've got a couple of players where minutes or injuries are a slight doubt, I will discuss bench boost at the end of the video if you're interested, and what my general thought is as to whether it's worth playing it in Game Week 32. But let's start with Arsenal. Arteta said with Dek and Bukayo, they are both fit. It was a matter of 2 kicks. They are available for tomorrow. So that's Bukayo, Saka and Declan Rice. They obviously both came off with what looked like knocks, and apparently they were just knocks. The other player that did come off was Timber. On Timber, apparently it was cramp. The fact that he wasn't even mentioned by Arteta, I generally do think is a good thing, because whilst Arteta does like to conceal the truth sometimes, usually the player would come up in that discussion. So the fact that Timber wasn't even discussed there, as far as I can tell, I think that is a good thing. I will discuss Arsenal in a second, because I don't necessarily think that any of those three start. But yeah, I'll discuss Arsenal in one of the future sections of the video, because a lot of questions are coming in around those Arsenal players and whether I think they'll start Game Week 32. On Newcastle, Eddie Howe couldn't make the press conference because apparently he's been unwell for a few days. So Tyndall took this, but he essentially said that Gordon was back on the grass. On the grass, by the way, could suggest nowhere near team training, or he might be very close to team training. But he's back on the grass as of yesterday, and he'll be assessed later today. He made it sound like Gordon had a chance of being available for the first game in Game Week 32. My initial instinct is that Gordon probably, and I could be massively wrong with this, but probably doesn't start both in 32. And my prediction would be that he probably doesn't start either. Now, I don't want to say that with 100% certainty, because you just never know with Gordon, Howe and Newcastle. And I don't want people to rush out there and buy Barnes as a result. But certainly, if you were to put me on the spot right now and say who would play more minutes in the double between Gordon and Barnes, I'd probably lean towards Barnes. But Murphy is, of course, the safe one. But yes, Gordon is at least back on the grass in some form. Let's see if we maybe get some training pictures which suggest that he's taken part in some level of team training. And Isak is fine and has trained all week. So there are a few doubts floating around that maybe he's still not fully fit. I'll be honest, I don't think he's fully match sharp. But in terms of the injury, apparently he's absolutely fine and has trained all week. On Crystal Palace, Glasner revealed that both Richards and Lacroix are both fit and available for Game Week 32. That is positive news if you own someone like Munoz or Henderson, because apart from obviously Gay being suspended, it should mean that their defence is a little bit stronger than we thought it might be. Nketiah is suspended along with Gay. That obviously means that Mateta's minutes should be a little bit better in the first game of Game Week 32. Sadly, one player that we did want information on, especially for a lot of people on the bench boost, was actually Justin Kluivert. It was really vague once again. All we know is that apparently he's got overloaded muscles. Iraola did comment, I think in this press conference, that by overloaded muscles, he means the equivalent of what we call a niggle. So it's not an injury, but it's definitely more than just fatigue. He said we still have 3 days until Monday night, because Bournemouth play on the Monday in Game Week 32. We will try with Kluivert, Tavernier and Cini. I cannot tell you right now. He then went on to say that Sinisterra was the least likely of the three to feature. This feels a bit 50-50 at the moment. Honestly, I would be surprised if he goes straight back into the starting 11. Right, if he's not even been in the squad for recent games, if he's now fit enough to get involved, you'd imagine that could be off the bench. And even if he does start, he's probably not getting more than like 50 to 60 minutes, you wouldn't imagine. I don't know, though. At this point, I'm just hypothesizing. But it wasn't a particularly positive update on Kluivert. I think if I was on a bench boost and I had Kluivert, I might want to sell him. The issue that we've got is that Bournemouth's fixtures back end of the season aren't terrible, and Bournemouth are one of the teams that are more likely to double in 36. So if you sell Kluivert now, you might have to buy him back, and he might be okay. So it's a really tricky position to be in with him. If you can just get away with benching him, I would do that. On Aston Villa, Emery did say that all of the players who made the PSG squad are available. I just put available for Unai Emery. That's not what I meant to say. They'll be available for the game in Game Week 32. And Bailey could return to full team training as well. That just gives another Villa player that could potentially play in one of those forward positions. I'm going to discuss Aston Villa in the next section and discuss who I think will be in the starting 11 for Aston Villa. It's not looking good. That's all I'll say if you've got Villa players, is I think rotation could be very, very heavy. On Nottingham Forest, potentially positive updates for the likes of Wood, Alanga and Awonyi. Nuno said we're hopeful on all of them. It can be all of them. It can be none. It depends on how they recover and how they feel. Nuno is starting to become a little bit, for me, like Eddie Howe and Arteta, where it's like he might as well not have a press conference. But I would feel a little bit more positive on maybe Alanga than I would on Chris Wood, just because Chris Wood's been out a little bit longer. I don't think Alanga's issue looks particularly serious, but I don't know that. At this point, again, I am just guessing. If they are involved as part of a bench boost, then I don't know that that's necessarily a risk you want to take. Fabian Hertzler did confirm, and this was a new one that we weren't expecting, that Matoma will face a late fitness test and that he's going to be assessed today in training. He's not been fully ruled out, and again, it doesn't sound like a serious injury, but he is going to be a late fitness test. So once again, let's see if we get pictures of him in training, and then you can make your decision based off that. A lot of people were worried about Cole Palmer because he obviously didn't start in Game Week 31, then goes ahead and only gets 45 minutes and comes off at half-time in Europe. Maresca did confirm that this was a planned substitution, that Cole Palmer is absolutely fine. I think he's just building his minutes back up after injury, and maybe that tells us that he's not 100% fully fit. Cole Palmer is not a player that I would be worried about, though. I'm almost certain that he will start in Game Week 32. The final comments were around the Liverpool players, and apparently Alisson is now fully fit and available. Whether he starts or not, I'm not entirely sure, but he's definitely fully fit and available. And interestingly, someone asked, is Bradley ready to start? And Slot said, yes, he is ready to start. A couple of Liverpool journalists seem to think that Bradley will go into the starting 11. So if you want to take a punt on Bradley, not 100% confirmed, but he looks pretty decent for a start. I know I've just sort of rattled through that, and basically every update is they'll be assessed, we'll wait and see, and I know that's not helpful, but I can't predict the future, and at the moment, this is all managers are giving us. So you are going to be in a tricky position right now. Even me, myself, like I'm in a slightly tricky position, not even on the bench boost, I don't know if any of my players are going to play, so it does make the bench boost this week pretty tricky, as I'll discuss at the end, but largely, I think if you've only got one or two issues, you might be fine. If you're sat there with like one or two flagged players, a couple of minutes risks, you're going to be in a really tricky position for 32. So those are the main press conference updates. Again, as of Friday at 3 p.m, let's move on to discussing Aston Villa, Arsenal, Crystal Palace and Newcastle. So lots of people would have picked Aston Villa players on Game Week 30 or Game Week 31 wildcard, or even if you're wildcarding this week, you probably want to own Aston Villa players, given that they've got Southampton this week, followed by a double game week, and then also a possible double game week in Game Week 36 as well. They're one of the teams that are more likely. So you've got a great fixture and then possibly two further doubles this season. And Aston Villa are a very good team that at the moment are in a really nice run of form, scoring goals and keeping clean sheets. So they're probably a team that you do want to invest in. But where on earth do you go? I will be entirely honest. I genuinely think we could see anything from 4 or 5 changes to their sort of best starting 11 to potentially 9 or 10. I think we could see that much. Now, obviously, a lot of people might say, well, they might feel like they're out of the Champions League after that first leg. There's no way Emery has that opinion going to Villa Park. He is going to absolutely want his full strength 11 there. And I would even argue potentially the fact that they are slightly behind in the leg would make it even more likely that players will be rested so that he can give that a full go. We know how much Unai Emery wants the Champions League. So I think we will see rotation. What you can see on your screen is a predicted 11 courtesy of FPL Villain. I want to say firstly, send absolutely no hate to Villain if this is terribly wrong, because he is only a fan, but he often does these predictions, and what he does alongside each player that he's predicted is put a percentage of confidence that he has that they start. So for example, Watkins is in his predicted 11. He has said that he's 85% confident that Watkins will start. You can see that Konsa is also there, and he's put 50%. 50% basically means it could be Konsa, it could not. So, I largely agree with FPL, and by the way, I'm not a Villa fan, so I might not have the best opinion on this, but I largely agree with what FPL Villain has said. The 3 players that I would definitely expect to start are the 3 that didn't start in the Champions League, which would be Watkins, Asensio, and Marlon. Marlon obviously can't play in the Champions League. Asensio wasn't club-tied, by the way. He could play, but he was on the bench, and Watkins was on the bench with Rashford starting ahead. So I would expect and be very surprised if Watkins, Asensio, Marlon don't start as the striker, attacking midfielder, and right wide player. What that then means is that you've got one position in the attack for one of Rashford, Ramsey, Rodgers. Have I missed a player out? McGinn, I guess, could play sort of up there as well. But yeah, you've basically got only one position for one of Ramsey, Rodgers, Rashford are the main three there. So can I confidently say that Rashford or Rodgers start? Absolutely not. And as you can see in this starting 11 that FPL Villain has, he's got Ramsey at 55% chance of starting. He thinks he's slightly more likely than both Rodgers and Rashford. If this is the team, that therefore means that both Rodgers and Rashford do not start in game week 32. Now, I don't want that to mean that you sell Rodgers or bench him and then get really upset and angry when he does start, but that's just our predictions at the moment. A lot of people will say, why would he bench Rodgers when he started every Premier League game bar one this season? There are just so many games. They have 8 games in 24 days. They have a game every 3 days, for 8 games in a row. They have got no rest. The turnaround is 9th of April to the 12th of April to the 15th to the 19th, 22nd, 26th. And they have got huge games in there. 2 legs against PSG, a game against Newcastle and City, in which they are fighting for that top 5 position, and then Crystal Palace, obviously, in the FA Cup as well. If there's a game to rest your key players, it surely is the Southampton game. Like, you're not resting them in any of those other games, and maybe some of them don't need a rest, but you would imagine that they would with the amount of minutes they've played this season. So my opinion right now is that, yes, I do think that Rodgers is probably on the bench, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we turn up and Rodgers is in the starting 11. I think Konsa is slightly more likely to start, just because I think it's a position which requires slightly less rest. He already got a bit of a rest, obviously, 45 minutes in game 31. He came on for half-time, I believe. So he's had a bit of a rest there. And when he's fit and available, he has started most games himself. They could, of course, play Mings, Disasi, Garcia, and Matson. And in that case, obviously, Konsa doesn't have to start. So even Konsa is a real risk. But I would have Konsa as more likely to start than Rodgers as per FPL Villain as well. The other player that I think could get a rest, he's got him here at 60%. I wouldn't be surprised for Tielemans. I think Tielemans is in like the top 5 players this season, outfield players, in terms of total minutes in the Premier League. Tielemans probably needs a rest too. So I guess what I'm saying here is even if Konsa is to start or Rodgers is to start, it is going to be in a heavily rotated Villa side. And of course, you would still expect them to comfortably beat Southampton, but I'm not convinced. By the way, Southampton have scored in 8 of their last 10 Premier League games. They're a team that do score, not lots of goals, but it's not necessarily a banker clean sheet, even if Konsa were to start, I guess what I'm saying. So that's game week 32, what I think will be the case, roughly what you see here from FPL Villain. The next question then is who to buy from Aston Villa if you're going to buy this week. I think if you're buying this week, I think there's only 2 options. I think it's Marlon and Asensio, because I think they're the most likely to start. Maybe an Ollie Watkins in there. But in terms of midfielder, it's Asensio or Marlon. I would personally go Asensio, because I think when he's on the pitch, he is arguably the best Villa attacker anyway. He's had really good underlying numbers since coming in. And I think in their strongest 11, if everyone's fully fit, I do think Asensio's there. I just think it's a lack of match fitness at the moment. So I think Asensio will start Southampton and then start 1 game in the double. I don't think he starts both. I don't think there's a single Villa midfielder here that starts all 3 of the next 3 Premier League games. I think Rodgers will be benched in 32 and start both in 33. I think that's probably the similar case for Rashford. I think Rashford is probably more likely to be benched this week and then start maybe both in the double. One as the 9, one off the left. Watkins definitely isn't starting all 3 because Rashford seems to be first choice 9. Marlon might, given that he's not going to be in the Champions League squad, but I'm not confident in buying him and expecting him to start all 3. So it probably does come back to Asensio. But if I was buying next week, I'd buy Rodgers. Because if he does get his rest against Southampton, then he's got his rest out the way. That was probably a really complicated, confusing section. All of that to say, I just think all of these Villa players are risks. I don't even think Martinez is like 100%. I wouldn't be surprised if he's even on there. Like, they can't risk key players getting injured ahead of that second leg against PSG. But if you were to ask me the 2 players that lots of people have that are most likely to start in 32, it probably is Martinez and Konsa. I just don't even feel fully confident on Konsa. There we go. Hopefully that's been helpful rather than just scaring you. If I was buying a midfielder this week, Asensio. If I was buying a midfielder next week, Rodgers. If I had a bench boost with one of Rodgers or Konsa, I'd still be tempted. If I had a bench boost with both of them, I would think that's a massive, massive risk. So just on Arsenal, we of course got the news that Bukayo Saka and Declan Rice are fine, they're fit and they're available. Saka on the FPL site, as of me recording this, still has his flag, so I've included it here. We've just spoken about Aston Villa in a lot of detail. I think Arsenal, some of the players are a little bit more straightforward. Like, I know there are concerns around like Raya and Saliba. I think with Saliba, he is such a fitness monster and he just doesn't ever show signs really of having any issues. And Arsenal have so many other issues in terms of their defence and they're going to be rotating elsewhere. I just think Saliba is going to be one of those players that they just don't feel like they need or can or want to pull out. So I would have Saliba at like 70% likelihood to start, which is a lot lower than normal, but I would be surprised if he's rotated. So I think if you've got Raya or Saliba, I think you're probably okay. Outside of that, I really think it's a bit of a minefield. I think Kivior, if I had to predict, will start. But given that he is clearly at the moment their first choice centre-back to partner Saliba, do they need to risk him? Could they do another combination where they play Saliba and someone else at centre-back with like Partey dropping into right-back and inverting? So even Kivior, who I think is probably the second most now defender after Saliba, I wouldn't feel fully confident on, but he's probably who I would go for if I was looking for someone outside of Saliba. Timber, I just don't think will start, given that he's had his injury concerns himself. And again, he's in their first choice starting 11 that they'll want to start against Real Madrid. We saw the game before Real Madrid in 31 that we saw a lot of the key Arsenal players being rotated, right? Ødegaard, Partey, Martinelli, Saka, Timber, none of them started. I think we will see a very similar starting 11 again. So I just don't know that I'd want to take that risk with Timber. And again, if Timber was part of my bench boost, I wouldn't be feeling very confident. I do actually think that Merino will start, if you've got Merino. But I've got a feeling it will probably be a midfield again. I think we might see once again something like Trossard, Sterling and Nwaneri. And if that's the case, Merino drops back into midfield. Or Merino could drop out altogether, and it could be that Partey plays in midfield, for example, who was previously rotated instead of Merino. I just think it's such a minefield with Aston Villa and Arsenal. Bukayo Saka, I feel fairly confident. I just don't see him starting. Right? Even if he's not got that knock, even if he is fit and available, he can get 30 minutes off the bench to maintain that match rhythm. Why wouldn't you start Nwaneri? Unless they really believe that Saka is out of rhythm, which he's not, because since coming back, those two performances off the bench in the game against Real Madrid, he was exceptional. I don't think he needs match rhythm. I think he needs to not overload his muscles and not risk the re-injury again. So I would feel pretty confident that Saka doesn't. I don't think Martinelli will either. Again, I think the front three will be Trossard, Nwaneri, Sterling. Maybe one of them starts instead of Sterling if he's really that unconfident in his performances. So out of those players on your screen, I think Saliba will start. Kivior, I think there's a chance. Timber, I don't think will. Merino, I'd put at like 70%, 65% likelihood to start. Martinelli and Saka, below 50. I just don't think they're going to be in the starting 11. I could be massively off on this. It could be that both Villa and Arsenal don't rotate at all. I just would be so surprised. Because even though Arsenal are in the lead, and even though you could say Aston Villa don't have much of a chance of coming back in the second leg, there's always a chance in the Champions League. Arsenal will want to secure that win and progress, and Villa will want to give it absolutely everything and leave nothing on the table. So there we go. Let me know if you disagree with that Arsenal and Aston Villa stuff. I just think if you've got them in your team, don't expect too much in terms of minutes, even if they do start. So, of course, we've gone through Aston Villa and Arsenal there, but the two teams that double in Game Week 32 are Newcastle and Crystal Palace. So a brief discussion around some of their players, and if there are any questions that I've missed out, please do let me know down below. In terms of whether you want to invest in Newcastle, I think regardless of your strategy, you probably should, because they've got a double game week this week. They're only one of two teams, both at home, and they've got some really good value assets. The only concern with Newcastle is unless you don't have your free hit or you're not planning to play it in 34, you don't need them for 34 because you can free hit them in, right? So take away that Ipswich game. It's not good. It's Aston Villa away in double game week 33. When some people are looking to bench boost, you don't really want them then. 34, you'd free hit anyway. And then it's Brighton, Chelsea, Arsenal with Everton at home in the final day. So yeah, game week 38's fine. But in the meantime, it's not a good run of fixtures. They have no chance of doubling in game week 36. So there's not a possible double game week that could come around the corner. So really, after that Game Week 32 set of fixtures, they're really pretty useless. I'm planning on selling at least 2 of them in Game Week 33. Now, if you aren't free hitting 34 and you need players for 34, it's brilliant. It's best case scenario for you if you're not free hitting 34, because you can have 3 Newcastle that not only serve you well for this week, but have arguably the best fixture of Game Week 34, and every free hitter will want anyway. So yeah, the fixtures aren't that promising really for most people that are on free hit 34 strategy. In terms of players that you should look to buy, it's pretty straightforward for me. Defenders, I would go Livramento or Burn. Not that I think Trippier is bad, but this is actually data across the last 10 game weeks. He's got 0.01 XG per 90 and 0.05 expected assist. He's had a few chances created in there, but Trippier's not really demonstrating that he's got insane attacking potential or insanely high upside. And you do have to judge assets based on what they're providing now. We obviously know Kieran Trippier of the past could create big chances for fun, but we're not seeing a massive amount of that. With Livramento and Burn, I also don't necessarily think they're hugely attacking, but you can see across the last 10, Livramento's attacking data has shot through the roof, through the ceiling, either or. Before that, it had been pretty underwhelming. It was like 0.06, but in recent weeks, his creativity's definitely gone up. We, of course, saw the assist in Game Week 31 as well. So this isn't just a knee-jerk. You can see here that he's got the second best creativity of all of the players on this list, including the attackers. Livramento is also better than Dan Burn for baseline bonus, which means that if they get a clean sheet with no attacking returns, Livramento is more likely to get bonus points in a normal game than Dan Burn. We also know that Dan Burn loves a booking as well, and so that normally obviously negatively affects bonus too. So I just think as things stand, price included, attacking threat included, bonus included, Livramento is the pick of the bunch. If you have Dan Burn though, it's certainly not worth a transfer, and if you think that 0.1 million will help you elsewhere, then I would absolutely go for Dan Burn over Livramento because I don't think there's a lot in it. I'm not sitting here and saying Trippier is a bad option, by the way. He's probably, if they were the same price, I'd probably go for Kieran Trippier, but they're not. He's $1 million more than Livramento, and I just don't think that's the best use of funds as of right now. For the attackers, Murphy is absolutely first choice right winger as things stand. And I think it's pretty clear that both Barnes and Gordon are preferred on the left. So I even think once Gordon's back, and let's say Gordon and Barnes and Murphy are all fully fit, yes, we might see a couple more early subs for Murphy, where Barnes comes off the bench or Gordon comes off the bench and they both play. But in terms of starting position in the team, Murphy has started every game since Game Week 14. He is definitely first choice right winger. He's cheaper than the others, 0.7 cheaper than Barnes. He's 2.2 cheaper than Gordon. I see no reason why you wouldn't go for Jacob Murphy, other than just wanting to differentiate. His underlying data is pretty strong, great price, the output's there. He's just been absolutely brilliant. You can see here, second highest predicted points out of everyone on this list, according to Fantasy Football Hub, over the next 3 weeks. So yeah, I really like Murphy as the best attacker to have in terms of those midfielders. If you were to push me on one of Barnes or Gordon, I'm going to go off the basis that Gordon isn't quite fit and available to start at least the first game. And so really you have to take it as it comes. And I would probably go for Barnes at that stage. But I see no reason why you wouldn't want to have either Eddie Howe and then Murphy or Isak, or a defensive option like Livramento and then Murphy and Isak. I don't see where Gordon or Barnes fit in. I wouldn't even want them in addition to Murphy particularly. But yeah, if you were to push me right now, because you can see the underlying data for Barnes across the last 10 is really good. His goal threat is comfortably the best on this list, 0.60. His assist threat is the best on this list, 0.22. His big chance involvement is the second best on this list. He's got really good underlying data, Barnes, when he plays, and he's been playing really well. But Gordon, for me, probably is still first choice left winger when he's fit, and we just don't know when he's going to be back in the starting 11. On Isak, his data's dropped off a cliff. I'm going to discuss triple captaincy in a second and whether I think you should still do it. But across the last 10, 0.34 XG is lower than Murphy, and 0.1 expected assist is lower than Gordon, Barnes, and Murphy. So his data's been pretty rubbish over the last 10, across the last 6, across the last 8. In fact, for most of 2025, Isak's data's dropped off a little bit. It's similar to what we saw from Mohamed Salah as well. But Isak is still a fantastic footballer. And when we're talking about players of such a high caliber, form for me isn't as important because you just know that in any given week they can bounce back from that. But yeah, I wasn't impressed against Leicester. And this underlying data is somewhat worrying. But we do know that, as you can see here, still gets the big chances, still on penalties. I think his minutes will be pretty decent. He's still a fantastic option and probably is still the best captaincy option as well. So yeah, my best 3 Newcastle sounds a bit knee-jerky based on last week, but it would be Livramento, Murphy, Isak. If you want to change out Livramento for Burn, I think that's okay. If you want to go for a triple attack and go for Barnes instead of a defender, I can understand it. But yeah, for me, I'd be picking those three. So in terms of the Palace players, I think this is even more simple. I just don't think there's a lot of options in terms of who you choose right now. I do think you still want three because they've got a double-double. And I know the double-double isn't great. City, Newcastle and Arsenal all away. Bournemouth at home, followed by a blank, followed by Nottingham Forest and Liverpool in Game Week 38. It's not a really good run of fixtures for Palace. It's even worse, I would say, than Newcastle's. But 4 fixtures in 2 weeks, it's worth attacking for me. Unless maybe you don't have a free hit in 34. And then maybe you could say, do you know what? I'm okay with 1 or 2 because it then saves me a transfer in blank Game Week 34. But for most people who, again, are looking to free hit in 34, which based on polls looks like about 80% of people, I think they're worth definitely targeting. In terms of the best 3 to own, it probably involves Glasner. So if you've got the assistant manager, you can go for Glasner. It's probably Glasner and then Mateta and one of the others. But let's go off the basis that you have 3 spots available to you. It probably still is Munoz, one of the midfielders, and Mateta. I think Henderson is great for his price, but you just want at least 2 attackers. Arguably, you'd probably want all 3 of them, and you probably want Munoz. So I just don't see where Henderson fits in unless you're happy to bet against Munoz. But you can see his data still across the last 10 for Munoz has been really strong. Good goal threat, good assist threat, involved in almost one big chance every 2 games. I think the boy's amazing. Like, I'm a massive Munoz fan, and his minutes continue to look really secure too. So I'd certainly have him as one of my favourite Palace assets. Mateta should make sense, right? We think he's still first choice penalty taker. With Nketiah suspended for the Man City game, you would expect his minutes to be really good in that one, and even pretty good in Newcastle. He looked really sharp in Game Week 31. He's building his fitness back up. He's only 7.7. It's not like he's the same price as an Alexander Isak, and his data has been exceptionally good in recent weeks. 0.59 XG per 90, non-penalty. 0.15 expected assist per 90, up there with the same sort of creativity levels as an Eberechi Eze. Big chance involvement through the roof, 1.57 per 90. Projected points super high as well. Like, I really like Mateta, despite the fixtures not being perfect. I don't think he's essential by any means, because you could go like Sarr, Eze, Munoz, but I think Mateta, for me, if I was to rank the Crystal Palace assets for the next 2 weeks, Mateta would be top of the list. I actually still think that Sarr and Eze for these 2 doubles are probably better than Munoz. So if you're specifically asking me for Game Week 32 and Game Week 33, I think it probably is triple attack is probably the way to go, because I just don't see many clean sheets, if any, across those next 4 games. In terms of Sarr versus Eze, I genuinely don't think they're too far away from each other in terms of assets. Sarr's data is just better. Across the last 10, 0.41 non-penalty expected goals. For Eze, 0.23. And then in terms of creativity, because you might say, yeah, well, Sarr's got more goal threat, but Eze got 2 assists the other week. He's more creative. He's not. He's got 0.15 versus Sarr 0.19. Actually, those 2 assists, by the way, were a combined 0.08 expected assists. Now, I don't think expected assist is necessarily the strongest statistic. I think there are certainly ways it could be improved. But what we are saying there is that both of those chances were pretty good finishes. And if you watch them, you don't need data to provide that opinion for you. You can tell that the Munoz one even took a deflection. It was from outside the box. The Mateta goal, by the way, beautifully taken. Eze could have quite comfortably come away from that game with a blank. And whilst he's playing at a very high level right now, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Across the season, Sarr's got 7 goals. Eze has 2. If you want data, that's some output data for you. I actually think that Sarr is arguably equally as good of an asset, but then he's 1.1 million less than Eze. So for me, if you've got Ismaila Sarr in your side, you are not for a second considering selling him sideways to Eze. I know a lot of people are asking about that. Does not make sense for me. I think Sarr is a great option and probably does justify, say, going for him considering he saves 1.1 million. However, if you are in a position where money truly is no issue, you've got all of the other players you want and you had the money for Eze, then at that point, you can, of course, go for it. Because if they are so close, and Eze is just a better footballer, and he's more likely to score a goal from the edge of the box and just provide that moment of magic, then yeah, by all means, go for Eze at that point. But for anyone where money is an issue, which for most people it probably is, I would argue Sarr's just as good. All it needs is 1 goal from Sarr and a blank from Eze, and then the conversation flips again. So yeah, basically, I would have 3 Palace. I think Munoz, 1 midfielder, your pick, and Mateta is probably the best. in terms of overall structure. But in terms of targeting Game Week 22 and Game Week 32 and 33, I would probably be looking at a triple up of Mateta, Eze and Sarr. So let's move on to some chip strategy discussion, and we'll discuss bench boost in the next section if that's the chip you're looking. But for those that have the triple captain available, do you play it on Alexander Isak in Game Week 32? The short answer for me is almost definitely I would, and that's just because I don't see any standout options in the future, at least not sort of confirmed. So Game Week 32, I definitely do think that Isak is the better captain in comparison to Mateta, unless you're really chasing or you have concerns over Isak's fitness, in which case I still think Mateta's a great captaincy shout. I just think that Isak has to be first choice for me. So Isak against United or Crystal Palace, your next available option, assuming that you're not bench boosting in 33, is to play it in double Game Week 33. That would be on either, for me, Marmoush or Saka. They've got good fixtures. They're both on penalties. We expect Marmoush to be on penalties. They take some set pieces as well. Marmoush takes in-swinging on the left-hand side. Saka takes in-swinging from the right-hand side. And both of their teams you would expect to score goals. So I think that Marmoush and Saka are both really nice triple captains in 32. The only concern is we don't know 100% that Marmoush is as nailed as we expect. Could we see Phil Foden start as the 9-in-1 game with Doku and Savinho on the wings? We absolutely could see that. So we think that Marmoush is just going to step in and play similar minutes to Haaland, but we probably need a slightly bigger sample size to know that. And with Saka, we're expecting Arsenal to progress in the Champions League. How much might his minutes be managed? We just don't know. What if Saka picks up a knock? Let's say you decide not to triple captain in 32 and Saka gets injured in the Real Madrid second leg, which hopefully he doesn't, or picks up a big knock. Well, then your triple captain's in the bin. You have to go for someone that you don't want to instead. And whilst I think Marmoush is fine, if your plan was to triple captain Saka, then again, there's an issue with that. So I don't even think 33 is like a dead cert. You've got a really nice option there. There are concerns with both of them. The other option that you've got is to wait for what we think will be a double Game Week 36. Exactly which teams will double in 36 will depend on which teams reach the FA Cup final. We won't know that until after Game Week 33, after Game Week 34, in fact. And so you're taking a real risk here that firstly, there will be doubles in 36. And secondly, they're the doubles that we expect and the teams that we expect. What we could be looking at is for Manchester City, something like Southampton away, Bournemouth at home, which is probably better than the double in 33. The issue is Haaland is expected back around Game Week 36. So if he's not back, then great. Again, you've got Marmoush. But once again, what if Marmoush's minutes aren't perfect? Worst case scenario would be Haaland's not fully back, but he's in the process of being back and he might get minutes in 36. You're then even more worried. Obviously, if Haaland makes a dramatic recovery and he's back by Game Week 35, then great. We maybe look to triple captain Haaland if you have the chip. But I just think there's a lots of ifs, buts and maybes. And is it that much better than back-to-back home games for Isak? I'm not sure it is. Another double could be for like Bournemouth or Villa, but that's not going to be a great double. It's going to be, for example, for Aston Villa, it would be Bournemouth and Spurs. For Bournemouth, I think it's Villa and Manchester City. Do you want to triple captain Rodgers against Bournemouth and Spurs? Maybe. I just think for me, I would play it in 32 or 33. I would take it on Isak this week or play it on one of Marmoush or Saka next week, but know the risks that you run by keeping it till 33. And for those on the bench boost, I just get it done this week. For me, I'll end the section here. If I had the triple captain in 32, I would absolutely play it on Isak. So I've left the most difficult question until last, which is whether to bench boost or not in Game Week 32. There is no right answer to this because it really requires expected minutes predictions, right? It requires you to really accurately predict minutes, which honestly, no FPL manager right now is going to make an accurate prediction on everyone's minutes. It's so difficult. I think genuinely a lot of the Premier League managers do not know who they're going to play this weekend. They're probably making last-minute decisions based on fitness tests. So how on earth are we supposed to make those predictions if I genuinely think that the managers often don't have the best information or idea as to whether they're going to start a player or not? So that's the first thing. And then secondly, giving advice is so difficult in this case because everyone's bench boost looks a little bit different and everyone's starting 11 looks a little bit different. You might say, yeah, I've got two players that are minutes risk, but if those two players are like Foden and Konsa, that looks slightly better for me than if they were, I don't know, Kluivert and Matoma, for example, because they're both slight injury doubts as opposed to just being minutes risk, for example. So I think it depends on which combination of players you've got, what your prediction of the minutes is, but also a couple of other things. So the first thing is, have you specifically, have I spelled that right? Yes. Specifically set up for bench boost 32, or have you left it open? What I mean by that is if you chose Emi Martinez left it open for you. He's got Southampton this week, great, but he's got a double next week. If you chose as one of your defenders someone like Konsa, of course, another Aston Villa player, then again, you've left it open for yourself. However, if your bench boost includes like Verbruggen in goal and Milenkovic as one of your defenders, you really want to play that in 32 because they've not got particularly good fixtures in 33. So whilst, yeah, you might be able to get 15 players more likely in 33, your bench boost is going to look much weaker. So I think if you've left yourself open to bench boost 33, it probably is the right decision to now delay that in most cases. But if you've not left yourself and you've really gone all in 32, even with a player missing, your bench boost in 32 might still look stronger. What I've said here as well, point 2, there's no way to confirm you won't also have issues in the future weeks. You might say, yeah, I'm going to delay it this week because I'll play it in 33 because then I'll be fine. What happens if in 32, 3 of your players get injured? And that's possible. Or other players that you didn't even think were minutes risk suddenly get benched. We saw it with Palmer last week. We didn't expect Palmer to be on the bench. What if then? Then you've delayed it a week for an even worse looking bench boost and even more issues could crop up. So there's no confirmation that it'll even get better in future weeks. A lot of people saying they'll save it for 36. It might be a poor double. It might be a small double. And again, it might just not work with issues in your team that you're having to sort out and put out other fires. You might even then be forced into loads of hits in future weeks, as well as playing it in a suboptimal week. So it's very easy to say, yeah, just delay it. What are you delaying it for? Have you even looked at if there is a viable alternative in the future? Again, I don't want to give general advice because I think it's pretty rubbish here, but I'm going to do my best to do so because so many people will be in this position. I would say if you've got one serious risk in your team, and this is after transfers, of course, because if you've got issues in your team, just sort it with the transfers. But let's say you've used your free transfers and you've got one issue in your team, one player that you think there's a decent or serious chance that they don't start, but your bench boost looks really strong outside that, I would play it. If you've got 2 and it's perfect elsewhere, and maybe one of those 2 is like a Rodgers or a Foden, where they're fit and available as far as we know, we just think there's a good chance they don't start, then maybe I would. Like, let's say you've got Konsa and Foden, but it's perfect, the other 13, maybe you take the risk. When you're starting to look at 3 players, let's say in your team, you've got Saka, Foden, Rodgers as 3, you can't do that. You can't, because there is a chance all 3 of them don't get any minutes. And then that is literally, you've got a goalkeeper, basically, as your bench boost. It's just not worth it at that stage. I think 2 is right on that borderline. But if you're with free transfers, you can get to 14 excellent players that should all start and 1 slight minutes risk, go for it. 3 players. How many times have you looked at your bench where one of your players doesn't even play on your bench, but your bench has still scored like 20 points? Happens all the time. All you need is one of your players to get a nice big score, and the bench boost is justified. You don't need all 4 of your players to go absolutely massive. Hopefully that helps. It's a really difficult question to try and answer. Maybe I'll have a look through. Comment down below what your bench boost dilemma is, and I'll try to say whether I would do it or not, and how many free transfers you've got. But I would be encouraged to just try and get out of the way, especially if you plan for it this week and there's no better week in the future. Maybe just play it slightly suboptimally. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 32 deadline decisions video. Hopefully that has helped you. And if it has, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. I will be doing, of course, a deadline stream tomorrow. So make sure to tune into that 2 hours before the deadline. I will see you then. But until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.